House of Cain, Den of Wolves, Chapter 4, Episode 1. Secrets. 3 may keep a secret, but only if 2 of them are dead. Benjamin Franklin, Poor Richard's Almanac. Dragomir took a deep breath before he tossed a cellophane-wrapped bundle in my lap. It was a journal and sealed letter. Read the letter first, then the journal. I looked over at him. "What is it? What does it look like?" he said in a low, angry tone as he pulled out on the street. "One of my dad's missing journals," I said, and broke the red wax of the letter. "What do you mean?" he asked sharply. "One of?" "Unless this thing has more information than I think, there has to be more than one of these journals missing." "Well, just so you know, I didn't find out we were actually brothers until a few weeks ago myself. I didn't know how to tell you, and your father kind of forbade me from doing it. I just assumed that your mother had died all those years ago. I didn't know the story, nor did I realize we were more than just kindred spirits. I was just as angry at him as you're angry at him right now. The letter, the story, the journal will explain it," Dragomir said. "But God damn it, he should have told us a long time ago." "Will it help?" I asked. Dragomir disregarded the traffic in front of him for a moment and turned his head toward me. "It actually makes it worse." "Watch the road," Max said from the back seat, where he and Kit sat pretending not to hear what I had to admit was a family discussion. So I began to read the letter. "Jackson," it began. Could almost hear my father's gravelly, harsh, yet soft tone. "The information in the journal Dragomir has given you is as accurate as it can be. There are reasons I kept this hidden. And you'll judge me, I'm sure. You are who you are, after all. But try to think kindly of a man who, though has lived a very, very long time, died ignorant of how to show his feelings. You are different and more special than any other Cain that has come before you. The circumstances of your birth, a unique accident. Not to mention, because of who and what your mother was, you have power. Dragomir will show you how you're different, how we think you're different, and why, when, what, and how your power came. The gift that was passed from your mother." The writing trailed off here, and I could see the splotches of ink where my father must have sat, ink dripping from his quill, while he contemplated the words. "It is a gift, Jackson. No matter where or how it came about, whatever darkness it was born in. It is indeed true that the Lord takes tragedy and bad and uses it to bring good into the world." I had to stop and look up. I wasn't crying, but it was a close thing. "I can't believe this," I said. "Yeah, me too. It took a while. It doesn't get any better either," he said, rounding a corner. I went back to the text. "There will continue to be much you do not know, and I have ways to get that information to you as we will need it. Be clear, this is not because of any trust that I don't have in you. I have faith in what you are, in who you are, and what you've become. But because if our enemies get this information, it could cost the world everything." I pushed myself forward, not wanting to read the rest. I remember him and my grandfather having an argument about a prophecy that my grandfather said spoke of me. They almost killed one another, coming to blows over it. I do not know if you're ready for what is to come. The master who killed Angelique is not who or what we thought it was. And it's not alone. This is a conspiracy, and you must watch everyone, your friends as well as who you think are your enemies. I suppose if I would have seen what he'd intended, another blot, as if he were thinking. Never mind. It doesn't matter who the vampire is, you'll discover that soon enough. And I'm about to force their hand and jumpstart their plans. They will underestimate you, as many have before, but I trained you, and I know you've been ready for a long time to take this on. Just remember that your physical skills, though impressive, will ultimately decide this war. I stopped, stunned. War? Dragomir grunted. Conspiracy? I asked. Matt chuckled ruefully. Always a conspiracy, brother. It's like we live in a really bad dime store novel. I read on, chuckling. I hope I'm wrong, but if you come back from the fairy realm with the second daughter as your bride, then the prophecy has begun, and we don't have a lot of time. Read the journal. The story is short, but it's important, and you must understand my reasoning. I will not see you again in this life, but know, my son, I was never disappointed in you. You have always exceeded every one of my expectations and continue to grow far further along your path than I or any other Cain from our house has. I was never able to say these things while I was alive, and to be honest, you have to be hard, boy, or you will die. Hard because all of this is about family. Hard because it is started with family. And hard because it will end with family. All my love through the ages. And if you take nothing else to heart, my son, remember this one thing. Darkness is not the opposite of light. It's just the absence of light. And anyone, great or small, can bring a light into the darkness. With all my love, your proud father. I don't know how long I sat there, contemplating the words. Didn't even sound like my father. But I came back to myself as we pulled into the little lot in front of the house. Have you read the journal? I asked Dragomir. He nodded as he threw the SUV into park. Yeah, I have. Thought about it. I'll read the details later, when I have time. Let's go inside, eat something, and you tell us the Cliff Notes version. He nodded. Yeah, I have a lot of things to do and not a lot of time. I need you to look at a crime scene. Hell, I need to look at it. If it's real, then we have a problem. Always something else. Oh, it's not just about wolves. It wasn't that really late in the morning for Dragomir, but for Matt, Kit, and myself, it had been hours since any of us had eaten. Yeah, there's food over on the other side. The humans cannot eat it. Kit told me that it took all of her willpower to keep Matt from going to the little table at what could only be referred to as a reception to eat. Fairy food kills you with bliss, I'm told. Human brains and bodies can't convert that type of food into energy. And even if it could, that energy would be incompatible with our systems. Think of trying to use DC current for an AC device. It just doesn't work without a converter. And no one's been brave enough to experiment and find a conversion that didn't lead to death. We all had to keep Matt from wandering over and trying something off the food table, for want of a better word, at the reception. Still wasn't sure about Kit, but with everything going on, I didn't have time to deal with it, and I could use all the help I could get. And even if we were all likely to die soon, we ate quietly, none of us able to completely process everything that had happened over the last couple of days. I wanted no part of any of this, I had told Dragomir. But I let myself be pulled in anyway. Let wolves manipulate me. Hell, I let Kitsune manipulate me. Everyone. Because I knew I had to fight. It was my job. It was who I was. Okay, give us the short version. Drummer sighed. The short version is still a long one. Nevertheless, I'll do my best. Sometime around the year 1250 AD, some say as early as 1205 and others as late as 1288. There's no consistent dates from that time period. And many in Ireland were still using Ogham script, though that really just gave directions. I rolled my eyes and then gestured with my hand in a move along gesture. Dragomir looked at me. This isn't easy. One thing leads to another. It's all linear. Okay, just get on with it. At any rate, a girl named Alice was born in a small village in Central Ireland. He stopped for a moment thinking. Know how bad or horrible even a child in the third world nation thinks life is? Back then, life was a smelly, disease-ridden, horrid existence. Anything that helped make life easier was exploited until it was used up and destroyed. And that's what happened to her. But not what changed her. He stood and began to pace. Alice was a beautiful girl. Her beauty was so great that her name had been spoken and whispered all over the isle. People would come from far and wide to see her. And back then, Christianity still hadn't caught a complete hold of the peasants, and they still worshipped pagan ways. Alice's parents charged visitors to touch the blessed girl, blessed by the spirits of the old ways to be such a beauty. Dragomir stopped and looked around. I know this sounds kind of like a fairy tale, but much of what we've learned was from oral tradition. Tales your father picked up over time and piecing things together. I nodded. It was acceptable. Go on. Her father used the money to make their lives easier. All but Alice. Alice was a girl, a mere girl, and was treated like a prized pig. Stop. Nothing more. It was always the hard-working strong boys that were needed to work those craggy, infertile lands. Women were not respected. When Alice was an adolescent girl, an old lady moved into the cottage at the edge of town. She called herself Mama Nim, a version of Nimue, the name of the current Winter Queen, though I don't believe that they are the same. She was supposedly but a healer, and proved her worth and her faith in the old ways. The communion with druidic spirits, and with the Tuatha De Danann, their masters, the original druids. He took a long drink of water. Now I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I think everything goes back to here. I nodded. Not long after Nim moved in and began plying her sorcery, Alice bloomed. Bloomed? Mac asked. I almost forgot he and Kit were there, listening. Dragomir turned and glanced at Kit, embarrassment flushing his face. Kit turned to Mac. She bled, the moon blood for the first time, became a woman. Mac's dark face went pale, and he just shook his head. Never mind. This is when things began to change. Not only did her father cause men to pay for her viewing, but he started selling and using her body. Even the local priest wasn't immune to her call. The new prudish Church of Christians used the girl just as much as any other man. It was like a fever that came over them when she was near. They couldn't help themselves. And I know myself that I found a tale of the priest who had committed suicide over his own actions. In short, her life was hell. And you can only imagine what the barbarians of that ancient time did to her. I didn't want to imagine it. The old lady Nim took the girl under her wing. Now, some of these versions of the story say that she had to have the old lady put a spell on her father to get him to agree to let her apprentice. Others say she had to be forced to apprentice with the old woman. Either way, she ended up under the old woman's aegis, which allowed Alice to get away from the men of her village as much as possible. Yet, almost every night, some man or other would be on her, violating her. Dragomir shook his head. Go on, I said, horrified for the girl Alice, who had not yet connected to my mother. The old lady taught her many things, month after month, year after year, as the abuse continued. The lessons, though, they got dark and darker. What finally happened? Mac asked, lost in the story. She made a pact and became a true witch, a caller of demons, a demon rider, who can use the demon's power and store that power in objects for use later, extending the time that they can survive the demon. Eventually, demons eat their riders, or starts riding them, and then they become demon-ridden. Their witches have a special place in hell. I couldn't speak. In a way, I couldn't blame the girl to reach for power, and she needed to break out of something so brutal in a society that could have cared less and remembered her not once they killed her and planted her in the ground. But making a pact with the children of the fallen, that was incomprehensible. A sin so black that it seared the soul and ultimately destroyed it. There was no place to go after death if you had no soul. Dragomir continued. No one knows what happened, but the old woman disappears forever from the record. Alice disappears for only briefly. That village was deserted and gone, and to this day no one will live there. The area is said to be cursed, and the folklore about the village says that someone called the very fires of hell to burn it to ash. Whoa, Mac whistled. They got what they deserved, though. I shook my head. Yes and no, I said it slowly, so that they would understand. I cannot blame her for killing them. Calling the power of hell, bonding oneself with a demon, there's no excuse for that. It's a stain. A stain that I'm sure cannot be cleansed. Dragomir continued. She turned up later in various places around Ireland and then the mainland. She would marry. The man would die of suspicious causes, mostly the falling sickness, and then move on with his money. And every name different, but a variation of Alice Green. He took another drink. History goes cold for a while, and then in the early 1500s, a woman calling herself Alice of the Green turns up as an advisor to a king of a small, insignificant Latvian country, and it doesn't matter which one. It's no more. Dragomir was quiet for a long time, and I had to clear my throat to get him to finish. He looked up, his eyes lost, but he continued. Septimus ran across tales. The tales told of a horrible witch whose beauty would ensnare any who gazed upon her. He swallowed. It was said that she bathed in the blood of those virgins, performing dark and sexual rites with minor wizards of the area in order to gain power. Originally, the House of Cain only hunted vampires. I knew this. And then after a time, we hunted the werewolves because they were begotten by vampires. But eventually, the House of Cain began to hunt everything evil. And the evil of a true witch, one allied with a demon, is the most evil thing in existence, for they do not care about anything but power, and they feed blood, pain, and misery, chaos to the demon. He found her during a ritual, actually. He looked down at his shoes. Found her and a wizard chanting rites as they delivered a newborn babe into the world. He looked up. She held a sharp blade to sacrifice it to her demon. We were all silent, contemplating. Luckily, after a time, your father disrupted them, and the child was saved. He smiled. He placed me with a young man who was a minor wizard himself. Raised me. I inherited power from whichever wizard she'd betted who was my father. But I inherited power from our mother. So, I said sarcastically, our mother's an evil bitch. How does that not surprise me? Jackson Kane, Kit admonished, showing her pointed teeth to me. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have said evil cunt. Kit growled. You, my Jackson, are not nearly as funny as you think. It was a warning. What happened to her? I asked. Well, she got away. He shook his head. Septimus thought he'd given her a mortal blow. He'd pierced her chest. He'd done the same with the wizard, and that man had no magical protection. He died instantly. But she got away, a mortal wound in her side, and having just given birth. I can't fault him for thinking she was going to lay up somewhere and die. He stopped for a moment, took a drink, and continued a portion of his story that didn't concern him personally. And then, about 40 years ago, well, as you're almost 40, your father met a woman, and he fell in love. He was already old and tired and had determined that he would die fatherless and end the cycle of creating new Canes and new vampire masters. I nodded. I heard this part as much as he'd ever tell me of her. He was in love, sick with it. Dragomir was smiling. She was a beautiful Irish convert to Judaism. The usual things happened, and they were married, and she became pregnant. Then, during her last trimester, she disappeared. I can't tell you anything about their time together, though it was a happy time for him. He didn't hunt, and he was like a changed man. Bright. Your father and grandfather searched far and wide for your mother, and had only found out what they needed at the last moment. She was not the woman your father thought she was. Our mother was none other than Alice Green, and he had almost killed 100 years earlier. A few hundred years earlier. I shook my head. He always spoke of her with love, prayed about her, though he didn't know I could hear him praying. Dragomir smiled and nodded. Of course. You have to understand the nature of what was done to her in order to fool a child of Cain and Cain's father. Yes, Matt, looking around him. What are you looking for? I was curious. Popcorn, this story's good, he said, getting up from the couch. Oh, sit down, Kit told him, pointing back to where he had sat on the other couch. Dragomir continued with a wry smile. In order to fool your father in such a way as to get married and get a child on her, she had to become someone else. Someone who didn't have the trauma. Someone who was alive. Someone who was so real that her personality, her very soul was different. And that would be because it wasn't her own. I just stared at him. It's very complicated, but the truth is that I am your brother of blood, but not your brother of spirit. The woman that conceived you had a different soul, a stolen and used in order to get a child of Cain on a witch. And align it to the demons. And then, I continued, sacrifice a child to her demon, a child who had power. That was when there was a knock on the door. Max stood and glanced at me questioningly. I nodded. He slowly opened the door, revealing a man in a straw cowboy hat, faded jeans, and a button-up shirt, red with dust. He was obviously Native American. And if the skin coat tone didn't tell you that, the long braid that fell from his head, adorned with traditional eagle feathers, would have told you so. Can I help you? Mac asked. Fuck, Dragomir said as I smiled. Ah, I am Calvin Shadowwalker, he said. Cain knows me. I shook my head. What have you seen in the shadows, Walker? I asked the Indian. Black witches, Jackson Cain. And they are coming for you. Kit murmured demon sacrifice. Yes, Jackson Octavian Cain. You are to be for the table. Here ends Chapter 4, Episode 1 of the House of Cain, Den of Wolves. Chapter 4, Episode 2 will talk about witches. I hope you enjoyed this program, and I thank you for listening. This is StoryMan-Jack, and we hope you've enjoyed this program. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And please, most importantly, tell me, good or bad, what you thought about the video. We cannot grow as artists if we can't accept criticism. Again, thank you, and remember, your story is the most important story you will ever tell, so let's make it a great one. Have a great day.